Welcome to the Nuclear Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Brennan Moore. Today we're sitting down with Canon Bryan, who co-founded Uranium Energy Corp, Terrestrial Energy, and more recently, SuperCritical. Today we have a fascinating conversation about defining LEU, LEU+, HALEU, and the origins of the different fuel categories, and also Canon's new endeavor, SuperCritical. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Canon, welcome to the show. Let's dig in. This is going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to it.
I wanted to start and just thank you for being such a good resource. And I know there's a lot of people out there who feel the same way. Early on in me digging into the nuclear space, you lent me your time and your brain, and you've done that for ever since I met you from the beginning. So first of all, I just want to thank you and say thanks for everything you've done for me and for the industry, and also for taking the time today.
Well, I'm happy to help. I mean, I've made it a mission to share my knowledge that I've gained over the years from the industry with those that are seeking to come into it. So that's what I do. It's what I set out to do. So I'm definitely happy to help in that way.
Well, it's a big gift to the industry.
Thanks.
Let's talk a little bit about, we've talked with Reed Clay, the president and founder of the Texas Nuclear Alliance, and was very complimentary of you and the Terrestrial team of being early believers in the Alliance. We're here in Austin, Texas right now. So talk a little bit about what you saw early in the Alliance and what made you guys have the conviction about becoming early members.
Yeah, well, I first heard about Reed Clay and some of his early thoughts on what he had in mind for the industry here in Texas, maybe about 4 years ago. And it instantly clicked in my mind as something that just made so much sense. And so I immediately embraced it and embraced Reed. And I saw him speaking at a conference, and I immediately went up to him right after his talk and introduced myself. And I said, look, Reed, this is who I am. This is who we are, Terrestrial Energy. And I really want to support whatever you're thinking of doing, because I think you're taking the right approach and you're on the right track. So I would have to say for sure the respect is mutual. I think Reed has just done an unbelievable job of setting this whole thing up here and being a real linchpin for the industry in Texas.
Yeah, it really is incredible. And they're only at the beginning of what they built out. Let's get a bit technical. Can we get a bit technical? And, well, technical for me. I actually would ask, let's not get too technical, because then you'll lose me.
Okay.
What I'd like to do, I'd like to focus on fuels today. I would love to talk about LEU, LEU+, and HALEU, and also the uranium side. Mm-hmm. So that's the scope of what we'll talk about today. And I'll just start by giving you, and it might be helpful for people listening to know, from my non-nuclear perspective, how I frame LEU, LEU+, and HALEU in my mind. Mm-hmm. Because admittedly, a year ago, I had no idea what those meant. And so I'll start, and I'd love to get your more refined definition of each. But really, most of the market and technology was built around low-enriched uranium, LEU, which is enriched at less than 5%, I believe.
Yes.
And some of the more advanced reactors are built around LEU+, which is essentially 5 to 10%. And then a lot of the more advanced reactors, which this is a hot topic that we could probably talk about for an hour, and we won't today, but I'm sure we could, and maybe we will
for another day. Yes.
Are focused on using HALEU, which is essentially from 10 to, I believe it's 19.75 or almost 20%.
19.9. Yeah.
So let's call it 0 to 5 is low enriched uranium, LEU. Mm-hmm. And again, in my mind, I've been calling that LEU, but you told me, I guess it's LEU, right?
LEU, yeah. LEU.
So LEU 0 to 5, LEU plus 5 to 10, and HALEU 10 to 20. Let's start there.
All right. So before I can go there, I'm gonna go back in history a little bit.
Okay.
I'm gonna make the assumption that everybody in the audience knows what enriched uranium means. But back when I first started in the nuclear industry over 20 years ago, well, there was no such thing as HALEU, really. That was not a designation that we had for enrichment in the industry, or LEU+. So I'll tell you what we did have, just to provide some context. So we did have LEU, and that was, as you said correctly, everything from 0 to 5% enrichment of uranium-235. And then we had something called MEU, which was medium enriched uranium, and that was anything from up to, I believe it was, don't quote me on the number, but I think it was around 70% enriched. And then everything above 70% was HEU, highly enriched uranium, which is basically bomb grade material, right? So those were the distinctions. There was also something called SEU, right? Slightly enriched uranium,
Okay.
which is everything from, 0.7% up to, I want to say 2%, I think is what it was, más o menos. Okay. And of course, everything from, and then there's 0.7%, which is NU, right? That's natural uranium. There's no enrichment. And that is how uranium occurs in nature. It is enriched naturally with 0.71%, roughly, 0.711%, if you want to go technical, of uranium-235 isotope, which is the fissile isotope, which is what makes all the magic happen. And then you also have something called DU, which is depleted uranium. So when you enrich uranium, you're sucking uranium 235 out of the uranium 238, uranium 235 sort of combination of isotopes. And then but they never sucked it all out. They always left like 0.2 or 0.3 or even 0.4 of 1% of U-235, and so that would be called depleted uranium, and or tailings, if you will. So those are the distinctions we had. Some of them are based in like some actual real world, mechanics of how uranium isotopic enrichment happened in nature, and then a lot of the other ones were really kind of arbitrary, right? So the fact that LEU was only 5%, and that was sort of the cutoff for where industry chose to enrich, was kind of arbitrary. And I guess they figured anything over that was, getting into different territory for some reason.
Gotcha.
So now in the last, I would say 5 years, there's these new categories which have emerged.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now you've got, as you said, LEU plus, which actually, frankly, I haven't even heard that term until like maybe 1 or 2 years ago. And then, in terms of HALEU, that was a term that entered the lexicography maybe, I don't know, 5-ish years ago. Never heard of it before. Before these new reactor designs started to, get developed, and instead of using plutonium, which is what they would historically use as fissile material, they decided, okay, we can run these on HALEU.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's really, as you point out, it's just a difference in the levels of enrichment, subtle differences, and none of those, like up to HALEU, would really, in my mind, create any kind of proliferation risks. But what it does do is it creates an extra burden of fabricating those fuels, right? Because you have to do a lot more enrichment, and the relationship between the enrichment, the cost of enrichment, including the energy and actually even the uranium inputs, is not a linear relationship.
Yeah, it's not linear, right?
Yes, with the level of enrichment. So, which is counterintuitive, but that's what it is. So, your cost of producing LEU is like $2,700 a kilogram or something. I'm going to get these numbers a little long, but don't quote me. But like something like $2,700 per kilogram, and the cost of making HALEU is like $32,000 per kilogram.
Wow!
So it's clearly not a linear relationship. It requires more energy to do more of the enrichment at those levels.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think it would be helpful too to frame, again, just from my perspective, it seems like most, if not all, of the light water reactor technologies, whether they're pressurized water reactors or boiling water reactors, call those Gen 2, Gen 2 plus, the Gen 3, Gen 3 plus. Again, classifications that have emerged.
Yes.
Seems like they all used LEU,
They
less
did.
than 5%.
They did.
And then the new reactors are all using LEU plus or HALEU.
Yeah.
Is that generally correct from a classification standpoint? The light water reactors can use low enriched uranium, and the advanced reactors of different sorts, whether they're molten salt reactors or high temperature gas reactors or whatever the reactor design is, are relying on either LEU plus or HALEU.
So, I mean, I think that's just the way it worked out. So somewhere back at the dawn of the atomic age, they all decided, well, we're going to make these light water reactors, and we don't want, so this was all started by the U.S. Navy, right? When they were building reactors for nuclear subs, right? And actually, the enrichment that they used for those subs was like 90% enriched fuel, basically bomb grade material to make fuel. But I guess it was the U.S. Navy or the U.S. military that decided, okay, we don't want any chance of proliferation. If this is going to go out into the civilian world, if we're going to have civilian nuclear power plants, we don't want, XYZ corporation or even like a state-owned utility having access to these highly enriched materials because it's a proliferation risk, right? We want to control that. We, the military, right? That's what they're saying. We want to control the highly enriched materials. So we're going to cut it off at 5%, and that's it. Nobody is going to get more than 5% enrichment. That's the way these reactors are designed. That's the way all the regulations are going to be written up. That's the way all the international treaties are going to be written and agreed to and signed by like all the nuclear nations going back and forth. And it's really quite a complex system that they built up, like 60 years ago that everybody agreed to back in a time when people could get in a room and agree to stuff, right? And so now these new designs, which are not light water reactor designs, they are the Generation 4 systems are different in the sense that they don't use a water coolant. So that changes the game completely. And a lot of these designs, when they were first invented and when they were tested in the labs, they generally tended to use plutonium, which they needed because there's a quite different dynamic which is going on in terms of the enrichment levels of the fuel and the fuel efficiency. And, some of them were fast spectrum, and so you need a whole, sort of different kind of fuel. And so they used plutonium, and because the labs had plutonium or they got it from the U.S. military or whatever. So, but we don't use plutonium in civilian nuclear energy, right? So there's no way that those reactor systems could work in a civilian market unless we decided to just legalize plutonium and give it to everybody. Just start selling it at your corner store or on Amazon. No, that's not going to happen. So they had to use the next best thing, which is HALEU. That's when this concept came about. Okay, we need higher enrichment of fuels, otherwise our systems simply will not work. Bottom line. So that's where this whole thing came about, is because, okay, we can't use plutonium, we've got to use higher enriched fuels.
That makes sense. So interesting, the history.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot a little bit, and I want to talk first about your interesting theory and perspective on AI and how it ties into the deployment of nuclear. And then that's going to help frame a discussion for us to talk about uranium extraction and what's happening there, and also your interests and views in that space. So give us a little bit of your theories of the world on AI as it pertains to nuclear deployment.
Sure, absolutely. So let's first start by framing where we are today. Okay, what does the AI deployment look like in today's market, in today's society? I think we have a sense of what that is. It's growing rapidly. The advances have been quite extraordinary and appear to be accelerating. I think everybody can agree on that. And I mean, the interesting thing about AI is that it requires a lot of computing power, just massive, massive amounts of computing power. So the world has figured out, or at least the high-tech industry or the AI industry has figured out, okay, if we're going to have AI, we need a lot of computing power. We need to build these data centers. We need to install GPUs. We have to go on as this massive, massive multi-billion, multi-trillion-dollar binge of building out these data centers as fast as we possibly can. And companies like OpenAI, Sam Altman's company, for example, just demonstrating that they're willing to invest hundreds of billions of dollars to build this capacity in mere months, which let's see if they're successful at doing that. But that's where we are today. And so I think it is a fairly fringe idea to suggest that we will achieve at some point something called artificial superintelligence, right? So people talk about artificial intelligence. That's AI. That's what we have. That's ChatGPT. Right? We use it every day now. A lot of people do. And then they talk about artificial general intelligence, AGI, and which is just a whole other level where AI is just like doing things for you without being prompted. And then the next level of that is artificial superintelligence. Okay, so now we're sort of getting into like a James Cameron science fiction movie territory, and you have a system of intelligences that are all way, way, way smarter than humans, and they're all working together, and they're all self-improving, recursively self-improving all the time, forever. And so the growth of this superintelligence is just never end. It'll just go on, and it'll get smarter and smarter and do more and more. And so, I have this theory about superintelligence. I think that that it is imminent. I think a lot of people maybe don't think that or don't want to think that. They think that that is a scary thought, and it will have dire consequences for the human race. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. We don't know. But the one thing you got to understand about superintelligence is that it will start doing things on its own, things that are done by humans today, like, for example, running governments or, building power plants or building data centers, right? They'll build their own data centers. And how do they do that? How can a computer do that? Well, if you put a superintelligence together with robotics, what do you get? You get like an incredibly ingenious set of intelligences that has practical capabilities of doing stuff, of interfacing tactilely with the real world, the physical world. So I like to point out this little anecdote that just absolutely sold it for me on this idea that robotics could take over in this way. And that is, there's one of the labs or one of the university, I think it was MIT or one of the universities, some university kids built a machine that could solve a Rubik's Cube in like 0.3 of a second, right? I don't know if you've seen this. And you've got the Rubik's Cube, and they've got the robot is like hooked into it, and then they go, they start it, and it's like you blink and you miss it. You can't even see it. It's physically doing it. You can't see it because it's too fast. It's like the eye doesn't process information that quickly. So then they slow it down to like 1,000th speed, and you can see it's like solving the Rubik's Cube in 0.3 of a second. Okay, that's what we're dealing with. That is robotics. That powered by a superintelligence, which is operating at 200 IQ, and there's millions of them. That tells me that there's going to be a dramatic change in the way human civilization works, right? So I think this is imminent. What does this mean?
Yeah, exactly.
What does this mean for energy, right? Because here's the ironic bit. You can't have superintelligence without energy, because superintelligence runs on data centers, and same with robotics. You can't have superintelligence without data centers, and you can't have data centers without energy. You can't have energy, generally speaking, I think, without nuclear energy, right? And here's the thing. Superintelligence is going to be making all these decisions about building data center capacity, and hence the energy capacity is going to power that data center capacity. So, but the superintelligence is not going to take months and months and have, community engagement and a Q&A period and all this, hand-wringing and stuff to make a decision on whether or not it's going to build a nuclear power plant. No, it's going to make that decision. Instead of taking years, it's going to make that decision in 0.3 of a second. And it's just going to build them.
Yeah, I thought you were going there with that, is that the robot and the machine is going to do objective analysis on what is the best energy source to continue powering myself. And it pretty objectively is going to arrive at, I need a lot of nuclear power.
Yes, the data is there It's a brilliant machine. So it has access to all the data. Obviously, that's what AI does. And it will have everything it needs to make its own decision instantly. And it will self-regulate. And it will, hopefully it's aligned with human, desires. Like it will have an underlying philosophy of, okay, whatever I do, this is the AI talking, the superintelligence talking. Whatever we do because we want to maximize human flourishing and we want to minimize human suffering. So with all this framework in place and all the data, it can make all those decisions instantly. And with the robotics, it'll build at a rate which has never been conceived of, right? A rate at which humans could never build big infrastructure. It just wouldn't happen that quickly. So, I mean, there's loads of prognostications out there about how data centers are going to be plastered all over. This concept of plastering the Earth with computing capacity. Well, you can't have that without also plastering the Earth with nuclear power plants.
You don't think it's going to plaster the Earth with solar panels?
I do not. Well, I think the ASI, the superintelligence, will look at the data and it will not choose solar energy as an energy source.
Exactly.
That is that's my opinion, right? So others can disagree, but it's
and I mean, solar will always have we're in a we need everything situation, and there's a lot of existing solar infrastructure that should continue to generate power, and it will always have its use cases. I mean, I think putting it on top of a house in a remote location where there's not a surface area issue of being able to create enough surface area to cover with the panels to power a specific structure makes a lot of sense. When you come to really dense uses of power, I mean, I agree. There's a pretty objective analysis that can be done. So So what's the big takeaway here? The takeaway is that we're going to need a lot of nuclear. We're going to need a lot of fuel, whether it's LEU or LEU plus or HALEU. And we could talk a lot about what decision that robot and machine would make there. We'll skip that for now. What is the implication on, okay, we need a lot of nuclear and therefore we need a lot of uranium? And so let's expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, currently in the world, we have around 440 nuclear power plants that are operating. And that is generating approximately 4 to 5% of total global energy, okay? That includes all energy, including industrial energy and transport energy, all energy. It works out to about 9% of total global electricity. All right. So when you think about it, that's a lot for 440 power plants. But given these changes that are, in my view, imminent, I think where we're going is the superintelligence is going to build thousands and thousands and thousands of nuclear power plants. I think that's what they're going to do. And so, from my perspective, if you're going to have thousands and thousands and thousands of nuclear power plants powering some huge fraction of total global energy, then you need fuel, right? You need to provide the fuel. And right now, we do not have the supply chain systems in place to be able to provide that fuel. And I don't think the superintelligence is, maybe they could build mines and things, but that's not very efficient. So it is a fact, not a well-known fact perhaps, but that the world's oceans contain 4.5 billion metric tons of uranium. That's around 10 trillion pounds. That's enough uranium to provide highly energy dense uh, energy delivery for 11 billion men, women, and children.
Wow.
That's that's max pop, right? The UNM, the United Nations prediction for max pop, 11 billion men, women, and children, and it's enough to provide them with that hugely energy dense, energy rich energy for around 400,000 years.
Wow.
Okay, it's a lot of fuel.
It's a lot of uranium.
It's a lot of fuel. So it's a lot of uranium. So I have recently started a company. It's called SuperCritical Technologies, and we have licensed the exclusive rights for this proven technology to extract uranium from the ocean. It was patented by the U.S. Department of Energy, and the U.S. Department of Energy provided my company with an exclusive license to that technology. So my company is in the business of engineering the mass industrial scale deployment of this technology. So it's proven in the lab, it was proven in small scale experiments out at sea, and they did a whole bunch of testing and oceanographic testing and things like this. And but our job as a company is to take the proven technology out of the lab and into industrial scale deployment. So that's what we're going to do.
Wow, that's exciting. Congratulations. SuperCritical.
SuperCritical. Yes.
And Genesis on the name. I guess it's a bit intuitive, huh?
Well, it's meant to be a double entendre. Mm-hmm. Supercritical has meaning. It's an engineering term. It has to do with the physical states of water. It's like a weird phenomenon where water can be a liquid, a gas, and a solid all at once at a certain temperature and pressure, and that we call that supercritical. And so that is the basis for the name of the company. But it also implies that these metals that we're going to be extracting from the ocean, from seawater, are critically essential to the proper functioning of our industrial economy and in our society. And they're so critical, in fact, that they are super critical.
There's a list, right, of supercritical metals and minerals.
So the U.S. Department of Energy has a list of critical metals. It's about 50 metals, and that are desperately needed, urgently needed for the proper functioning of our industrial economy and our military apparatus, and those critical metals, generally speaking, are not produced. They're not mined or extracted in the U.S. in anywhere near the appropriate level, right? So what happens then? Well, the United States is forced to import those metals from other countries. And in a lot of cases, in most cases, those other countries are China, right? China produces a lot of metals, and they're very good at that. They're not particularly environmentally
conscious
conscious about how they do it, but in any case, they do it, and so the U.S. is dependent on foreign countries just to have the basic critical metals that we need as a society to function. So that is a very dangerous scenario, in my opinion. I don't think that is really where we want to be as a nation. So hence why the deployment of this technology can help us to regain our independence, our domestic independence, security supply of nuclear fuel, uranium, and other critical metals that are all in the world's oceans. And we now have the technology to extract them economically, safely, environmentally inobtrusively, and supply the United States with these critical metals.
So many questions.
I'll
ask a few. I guess I'll give a little bit of at least framing my perspective of what you just said, and my understanding of the concept is essentially to strip out uranium from seawater. So let's relate it to desal, which is removing salt and other materials from water to use to treat the water to allow it to be drinking water.
Yes.
In this case, you're removing uranium and other materials to use them for fuel and other use cases. So first question, I guess, would be, is it only uranium? Are you only focused on uranium, or hence the name supercritical? Are you also focused on other supercritical metals and minerals in the process?
Yes. So the entire periodic table exists in the ocean, right? All the metals that exist in nature are in the ocean, generally in very, very, very low concentration, right? So the DOE patent, the one I talked about a little earlier that we have an exclusive license for, is focused on uranium, but it also does capture a few other metals just sort of by accident, right? That just they just get caught up in the capture process. So, but there are other, and that's a function of the chemistry, right? So this is all really rooted in chemistry and how certain chemistries react with the uranium minerals, the way that uranium is mineralized in the ocean, which is, if any nerdy people in the audience want to know, it's uranium, uranyl oxyhydroxide. That's the mineral. That's the mineralogy. So the chemistry that the DOE invented and perfected and patented is specifically geared towards that mineral and preferentially attracts it. Okay? So, but as a company, we happen to know that there are other chemistries out there that are proven for other metals, and we can acquire the license, the exclusive license to use those chemistries. And furthermore, we are inventing our own chemistries to extract yet other metals. So the plan for the company is to really develop a suite of IP, which we will ultimately translate into industrial scale economic extraction of a whole suite of metals from the ocean.
Wow. That's so interesting. I'm thinking, allow me to be devil's advocate a little bit and think of adverse consequences, and we're going to have to be very hypothetical here.
Okay.
Let's assume you pushed the whole ocean through your process and you removed as much uranium and supercritical metals as you could. Mm-hmm. Is there an adverse impact to that? Is the uranium serving a purpose in the seawater, I guess, is my question. Mm-hmm. Is there an adverse impact? And I guess bolting onto that question, I'm sure there's a replenishment of water to where the water is, it's not like you're always moving the same water through the process. That's right. So I guess it's twofold. One, are there potential adverse impacts to removing that uranium from the ocean that we're not thinking about? Mm-hmm. And then secondly, if you could talk a little bit about that process of the water replenishing and how that works, because that's really interesting.
Surely. Yeah. So the U.S. Department of Energy actually did a lot of studies on this to figure out, okay, well, what are the impacts not only of the chemistry that we're deploying into the ocean, and what effects, if any, that it would have, on marine life or, the quality of the water or what have you. But they also tried to figure out exactly what you're asking, which is, okay, what if we remove all the uranium from the world's ocean? What are other consequences? We don't know. Maybe there are some life forms out there that absolutely depend on the uranium. We don't know. So, but basically, they figured out a couple of things. One, no, it doesn't, and there's just way too much for it to, and just way too low concentration to ever really make any kind of an impact. But secondly, and this is a super interesting phenomenon, which I don't even myself fully understand, but the level of uranium in the world's ocean is at an equilibrium. What does that mean? If I were to go into the Gulf today and remove 100,000 tons of uranium, well, guess what would happen? 100,000 new tons of uranium would filter out of the seabed from the crust of the Earth, and it would just automatically create that equilibrium. It is like, sometimes I just think this planet is alive and conscious.
It's kind of like the human body.
Yeah,
it's an incredibly intelligent machine.
Yeah, Dr. James Lovelock would be smiling right now at this idea. But no, it's true. If you if you remove uranium, it will autocorrect and get back to its equilibrium level, its homeostatic level. So don't ask me why that happens. You'll have to ask a geophysicist, but that's what happens. The DOE did a lot of oceanographic studies on various different bodies of water and seawater. They found out, they learned a lot about currents, because ideally you want to be doing this and not using pumping power to create the flow. You want to be using some kind of natural forces, if possible, a passive approach, right? That's what we're doing. But they figured out that the currents in the Gulf are actually very, very strong. And so that creates that natural flow that allows us to do this process as a passive approach. So that's one thing, very important, because once you add pumping power in, it just changes the economics significantly. So we want to avoid that at all costs. But the second thing they found out was the Gulf, just right over here, it replenishes itself, or it turns over, I guess is a way of putting it, or empties out and refills twice a year.
Twice a year.
Yeah. So the whole ocean is just constantly moving around in streams all over the place. And the water that's there one day is not the same water that's there the next day. So, but in terms of the Gulf, the whole thing empties out and replenishes itself twice a year.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk now. You mentioned the low concentration of uranium in the water. So presumably it needs to be a really high volume of water that you're pumping through your process. So can you, without getting too technical, can you talk about how just the pure volume of water you have to push through and how the actual extraction process works? It would be interesting to dig into that a little bit.
Sure, I'll try to. It's a bit technical, but I'll try to keep it high level. So again, we're relying on the flow rates of the currents that are in the Gulf observed in the Gulf. So that's a lot of flow. So we don't have to really worry about that part, thankfully. So the process, in general terms, it involves the use of acrylic fibers. Okay, specially designed acrylic fibers, which are cheap to produce, but they have enormously high surface area, right? I mean, just almost inconceivable levels of surface area. And so you take those fibers and you treat them with the chemistry that I was referring to earlier, the chemistry that is specifically attracted to the uranyl oxyhydroxide mineral, right? And you flow the water through the chemically treated fibers, and through all the studies, it was determined that 21 days is kind of like the ideal deployment period. And after 21 days, the fibers would have 4,000 parts per million uranium. Okay? Now, 4,000 parts per million is about 4 times better than the average grade of uranium reserves in the United States. It's about 10 times higher grade than most every producing mine in Africa and the uranium reserves in Africa. So it's a high concentration. 4,000 ppm, 4,000 parts per million, or 0.4 of 1% grade is a pretty good grade. Very economic. Very economic. So we deploy the fibers, 21 days. We retrieve them. We treat the pregnant fibers with another solution to extract the uranium from the fibers. And then we retreat the fibers and redeploy, and over it goes, on and on. Eventually, we have to replace the fibers. They don't last forever. But that's it. That's how it works.
And you're doing this on shore, close to the shore, or out on a barge, miles, kilometers off the shore? How far out are you doing it?
It's going to be out in the Gulf, but it doesn't have to be that far to enjoy the great currents that are creating that flow for us. So maybe 10, 11, 12 miles offshore. But it is what we're going to start our first commercial demonstration by buying a decommissioned Panamax ship.
Nice.
All right. You wouldn't believe this, but there's lots and lots of them. There's hundreds of Panamaxes in decommissioning, and you can buy them on the internet for like $3 million.
Soon to be a proud owner.
Yes, it's extraordinary. It really is. And they're exactly perfect for what we need to do because they have the double hull and they're specifically designed to store massive amounts of liquid oil below the waterline. So that is how we will do our first, maybe not just our first one, but maybe the first few. And each Panamax ship we've figured out, or our early designs indicate that they can produce around 2.2 million pounds of uranium per year, right? So we prove one commercial demonstration, which will produce 2 million pounds, which, by the way, is around 4 times more than the entire United States production of uranium last year.
Oh, wow.
So it's a lot. I mean, it's not a lot in the context of the annual reactor requirement, which is more like 43 million pounds per year. But if we prove one and we prove it's economic, then we can just build more. We'll just build 10 of them.
Yeah.
Or 100 of them, or however many are needed, right?
I'd love to talk a little bit about economics because at the end of the day, you have to prove that you can do it and that you can make money. Mm-hmm. And, desal for a long time has been technologically feasible and not financially viable. The returns just haven't worked. There's been a lot of use cases, even out in the Permian Basin, because there's as much produced water as you could ever need for a desal program. The issue was it's much cheaper to send it back hole into the earth, back down hole into the earth than it is to run it through the process. And so on this front, it'd be helpful to get your take. What do the economics look like? The baseline question would be, what's your break-even cost of uranium, essentially? And you don't have to share that per se. It would be interesting, though, directionally to talk about where is uranium at right now, and how does that compare to what you think uranium needs to be at for the math to work on this technology?
Sure. So spot uranium price today is $79 a pound. Okay. And as I said, there's very little production in the United States. And so if you want more production, that means you have to build more mines. And more than one major Wall Street bank have come out with their estimates of what the uranium price needs to be to incentivize capital deployment to new mine construction, right? And so that is not just the cost of building the mine, but also building in a risk-adjusted return for what could conceivably be quite a high-risk venture, right? Building a uranium mine with all the political connotations that go along with it. So they have estimated that price to be...
Can I guess the price?
Please.
I'm going to guess the price. $150.
Not that high, but
okay.
It's definitely more than it is today.
Okay.
So it's sort of it's a range of $100 to $115 a pound.
Sustainably for a long time.
Yes.
Because that's on the mining business. It's like, okay, the spot price is the spot price, but what can I sell it for 5 years from now?
Yes. So this is going right back to economics 101, right? You've got your short run supply curve, where you can sort of move things around with the available supply and price elasticity. But at some point that model fails, you have to switch over to the long run supply curve. And so getting to that $100 to $115 a pound, that moves us over to the long run supply curve. But we're a ways off there. And so the whole point of supercritical is to prove that we can produce uranium from seawater, and with a very economically robust returns on investment for less than $100 a pound, maybe even a lot less. And now that would be very, very exciting because it means that we have a low cost and clean and virtually unlimited supply of nuclear fuel for human civilization.
A lot of feedstock out there.
Yes.
There's a lot of feedstock.
Yeah, and it's all homogeneous, right? the concentration of uranium, it doesn't like vary in different spots, although the recoveries can vary based on different oceanic conditions. So that's one thing. But the concentration itself is totally homogeneous the world over. So, when you are discovering a mine or proving a reserve, you get all sorts of weird variations in the grades, from like 1 meter to the next when you're drilling your holes. And but you don't have that in the ocean. That doesn't exist. It's just totally, totally static.
So interesting. Who owns the royalty on seawater? Because generally in mineral extraction, there's, whether it's federal or, I mean, it's one of the reasons.
No, nobody owns. There's no royalties on uranium and seawater.
So it
that
must
doesn't
be
exist.
that's another really compelling component to the economic model is
Yeah.
because presumably uranium extraction onshore, at least in the States where there's privatization of mineral rights,
Yeah, totally.
has some sort of royalty burden associated with it.
Exactly.
It's basically unburdened by any sort of royalty,
That's right.
which probably gives you a 10 to 25% uplift on
It's
your.
the same as the oil and gas world, right? You've got your surface rights and your mineral rights. That doesn't exist in the ocean, really, unless you're going below the seabed.
Yet.
Yet.
Someone might decide.
So I'll tell you who owns it. The owner of the uranium in the ocean is the guy who commercialized the technology to extract it.
That makes sense.
And that's me.
That makes sense.
So, and in fact, you could say the answer to your question is I own the uranium in the ocean.
Well, and how did you? So the DOE did a lot of research on this, and I think there's been UT Austin. There's been some other thoughtful studies around this specific topic. And you guys, how did you come across it, and how did you convince the DOE to sell it to you guys and give you exclusivity? So that's a couple tiers there. But how did you come across the patent to begin with and the technology?
Sure. So actually, a friend of mine wrote an article about it in Forbes, Dr. James Conca, who's a PhD geoscientist. And I read about it with great interest. And this was in 2016. And I found out that the work that was being done on this was being done by the DOE and being led by the Pacific Northwest National Lab, which is in Washington State, which at the time, my company, Terrestrial Energy, had a lot of ongoing relationships with the DOE and with the DOE nuclear lab system. So I knew a lot of the folks at the PNNL, at the Pacific Northwest Lab. So I basically just made an inquiry and I said, look, I read about this technology. Jim Conca wrote an article about it, and I'd love to know what the status of this is. How what's this the state of this technology, and does the DOE have any aspirations to commercialize it? I already knew the answer to that one, because national labs don't commercialize technology. That's not what they do, right? They're scientific organizations. They're nonprofit. They invent stuff. They prove it. Maybe they'll patent it if you're lucky, but that's it. So then they have something called a technology transfer office at every lab, right? And the function of that office is to take the technologies which are worked on and invented and proven and patented in the labs, and then assign those rights or give those rights or license those rights to private sector corporations like mine, so that they can be commercialized. And labs love that, right? And especially the scientists, right? Because they put their heart and soul into inventing and proving all this stuff, and they want to see it have practical application in the real world. Of course they do. And so they love it when people come along and say, oh, we'd love to, buy a license for this technology. Great, let's do that. So when I went and inquired about it, this was like sort of when I got serious about my inquiry, it was sort of around 2018, 2019. And I had a full-time job at the time, so this was just like sort of a matter of interest. But I looked into it pretty seriously. But what I found out was I couldn't really do it as a business at the time, because for one thing, the uranium price was super, super low. It was sub $20 a pound. There was no way, there was no capital available for uranium, anything in the uranium business. Now, flash forward to today, a very different story. Like all the uranium companies that are out there right now, they're raising hundreds of millions of dollars each, billions even, for their projects. So it's a completely different environment. The uranium price is obviously much higher. And also, I think the world has really shifted, even from as recently as 2018, 2019. its views on nuclear energy. It's been a total sea change in the political and even like at the community level worldview on nuclear energy. It's just totally shifted. And I think part of this had to do with, the high-tech world and especially the AI world really embracing nuclear as, one of the only potential solutions that they have for deploying a lot of energy, really quickly with cost effectively and with small resources like land and metals and materials and stuff. So, so going back to the lab more recently and basically poking around, 5-6 years later, it turned out that the technology was still available. They had done more work on it since the last time I checked in, and they got a patent. But they discontinued the program because the head of the program retired, and so there was no one else to champion the technology. So, but they did a lot of work, a lot of really good work, and they got the patent. And by the way, the director of the project, who is also the deputy director of Pacific Northwest National Labs, who retired, is now one of my co-founders.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Dr. Gary Gill is one of the foremost experts on this, and a few other folks that worked on the project, either in DOE or outside of DOE or for one of the universities or whatever. So these folks work for me now, or they work with me. And but when I went back to DOE more recently and inquired about the technology, they told me that nobody had come knocking on their door asking for any technology licenses. And so as far as they were concerned, they were happy for me to have it virtually for free.
Wow.
So that's how it all went down.
And since acquiring it, you've also obtained exclusivity for it, correct?
Yes. So we have an exclusive license to the DOE patent.
That's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. How exciting. It'll be interesting to see how things unfold. So what's next for Supercritical? Give us, how can listeners be helpful? How can they be involved? Give us whatever else you want us to know about Supercritical, where you're at, where you're heading.
So it's still a very young company, but it's moving quickly and it's accelerating. There's a lot of interest in what we're doing. And I don't know exactly how much I can say. I'll just say, we raised $1 million privately, and our plan is to raise more capital to finance the development of this technology, to scale it to industrial scale, and get to a construction decision. And we also want to take the company public, which, with my background, that's just generally what I do. I start companies, I get them funded, I take them public. That's just sort of the normal, that's the normal continuum for the way I do my companies. So we want to go public on NASDAQ. And thankfully, we have multiple offers in front of us right now for this pathway. So, we're going through a process, and the plan is to be listed on NASDAQ in 2026 and have all the funding we need, maybe up to $100 million, to bring this to a construction decision. And that involves going through all the feasibility studies, right? And the design and testing and feasibility work, and doing probably a bigger pilot, following up on the pilot work that was done, the wonderful pilot work that was done by the DOE in the 2010s. So that's the path for the company. We get to a construction decision, then we will seek a loan from the U.S. Department of Energy Loan Programs Office, which is a $411 billion program that was actually created in 2005 by Senator Dominici, but it's over the years grown. It started as a $38 billion program. It's now a $411 billion program. It was massively expanded by the Biden administration. And it's been fully embraced by the current government, but it's shifted a little. So whereas the loan program was really funding a lot of sort of renewable energy projects, it's now shifted more to nuclear, some geothermal, and some oil and gas. So I believe that we have a great chance to win a big loan, DOE loan, that will fund, maybe 60-70% of our total capital expenditure for the construction of this project.
Wow. I imagine there's huge support within the DOE for
There is. I mean,
domestic uranium.
it's a DOE technology.
Yeah.
It's their technology. We're a U.S. company, and we're deploying it at industrial scale. So, and for the benefit of domestic U.S. industry. So it really doesn't get any more, American than that.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be exciting to watch how things unfold, and really appreciate you coming on again here today. And I want to ask you something I love to ask people, completely unrelated to nuclear, but you're a busy guy, and it sounds like you're going to remain a busy guy.
I hope not.
In a good way. So what's one thing that you do consistently to keep your mind and body sharp?
Well, let me answer that question by saying it's something that I don't do.
Okay.
That keeps my mind and my body sharp, and that is eating. I don't eat very much.
Okay.
So I practice something called time-restricted eating. So I fast for 21 hours a day.
Okay.
Right? So I have one meal a day, sometimes referred to as one meal a day, or OMAD. And I've been doing that practice for almost 4 years, and I feel like $1 million every day. It's really made a huge change in my life over the last 4 years, and it just keeps me sharp and energetic all the time.
What is your eating window? Is it dinner time, like 3 to 6 or 4 to 7, or?
It's 3 to 6, and the reason for that is because I want to stay married, right? So I would actually, if I had my choice and I weren't married, or I didn't care about getting divorced, then I would probably be eating around noon or late morning.
Yeah.
But because we have social time at night, I have dinner with my wife, and I start eating at about 3 o'clock.
Good plan. It's an extreme version of intermittent fasting, I guess.
Yeah, it's on the edge. Yeah, I mean, I think intermittent fasting is anywhere from 6 hours, 6-hour eating window to 8-hour eating window. I've heard those are sort of the generally accepted guidelines for intermittent fasting. So I take it up a notch because I'm just operating on another level. So I gotta crank up the wattage.
I love it. That's great. Well, Canon, thanks again for your time today, and congratulations. Sounds like a lot of exciting things ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, this was fun. I really enjoyed this conversation.